The sound came first, a wet, ragged gasp that didn't belong in the slow, sticky rhythm of the French Quarter afternoon. Marcus Coleman stumbled out of Decatur Street's sunlit chaos and into a narrow side alley, one hand clawing at the lapel of his tailored navy suit, the other fumbling for something in his pocket. Nothing. No inhaler. His vision tunneled, edges going soft, lungs locking up with a merciless grip. He tried to call out, but it came out a whisper swallowed by the hiss of a nearby fryer and the low hum of traffic. A young man in a hoodie brushed past, muttering, "Watch it, old man," without breaking stride. A couple slowed just long enough to look, their eyes skimming over the sight of a man crumpling against a brick wall before they turned away. The world kept moving. Joggers dodged him. A dog barked from across the street. Somewhere a saxophone wailed and then fell quiet, but no one stopped. Maya Williams was a shadow on the alley's edge, crouched low beside a trash bin, fingers sifting through a crate of glass bottles she could trade for coins. Her coat was too winter's too small, its sleeves frayed, her sneakers soggy from last night's rain. She heard the sound again, sharper. This time, a desperate wheeze like her grandmother's when the old woman forgot to check her oxygen tank. She froze. Grandma's voice rose in her head, clear as if she were right there beside her. "Don't get involved, Maya. People like us don't meddle in other people's trouble. It'll only bring more to your own door." Maya peered into the shadows. There, slumped beside a dumpster, was a white man in a suit, his skin pale and lips tinged gray-blue. His shoulders hunched as though he could fold in on himself and disappear. But his hand reached out, trembling, toward nothing in particular. She took a step closer. "Sir," her voice was small, shaking. "Are you sick?" He tried to speak, but only managed a rattling cough. Her eyes darted over him. "Expensive shoes. Watch that probably cost more than their rent, but no inhaler." She patted his jacket pockets, searching, empty. A swell of panic rose in her chest, hot and sharp. She'd seen this before. She knew how fast it could end. Her hand went to the inside of her own coat, where a coin pouch sagged heavy against her ribs. Inside was a single crumpled $5 bill, milk money, the last they had until Grandma's check came. She looked at him again. His breaths were coming in shallow snaps now, his head tilting against the wall as if even holding it up was too much. Maya ran out of the alley, down Chartree Street, dodging tourists and delivery bikes, clutching the pouch so tightly the fabric burned her palm. The red and blue neon cross of Ruth's Pharmacy flashed ahead. She slammed through the door. A bald man behind the counter glanced up, scowling. "Where's your mom? Please," she gasped. "He can't breathe. I need an inhaler. I have $5. Kid, inhalers cost more than that." Her throat tightened. "He's dying," she whispered. The man hesitated, eyes flicking to her torn coat. The desperation in her voice, with a muttered curse, he bent, pulled a generic inhaler from beneath the counter, and shoved it toward her. "Go. I'll call 911. She shoved the bill into his hand and bolted. The run back felt longer. Her lungs burned. The world blurred, shadows stretching, footsteps pounding, the hiss of fryer oil, the metallic tang of panic. She skidded into the alley. Marcus was listening sideways, eyes half closed. "I'm here," she said, dropping to her knees in the grime. She uncapped the inhaler, pressed it to his lips, and pushed once, then again. His chest hitched, then rose. A shaky breath, another. His eyes cracked open, unfocused, catching the small brown face above him. "Thank you," he managed. Voice or ASPING. Sirens wailed in the distance. Maya was already backing away. By the time the red lights flashed at the alley mouth, she had vanished into the crowd. Marcus lay in the hospital bed under sterile lights, the rhythmic beep of a monitor marking each breath he clawed back. The taste of metal still clung to his mouth. On the side table sat the inhaler, pink plastic, a fading butterfly sticker peeling at one wing. He couldn't stop staring at it. Jeremy, his longtime aide, stood at the foot of the bed, tablet in hand. "Doctor says you were minutes away from cardiac arrest," he said. "They said someone gave you this before the paramedics arrived. A little girl, 6, maybe 7, disappeared before they could get her name. She's the reason I'm still here," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Find her." Jeremy frowned. "We don't have a description beyond small, pink coat, and if she's a kid from around here, she's not going to come forward, especially not with the cameras outside." "Then we look without the cameras," Marcus replied, his gaze Fixed on the butterfly sticker. Quiet. No headlines. No press. Just find her. In another part of the city, Maya sat on the sagging edge of her bed, the coin pouch empty beside her. Grandma was still asleep in her recliner, the oxygen machine, humming like a tired lullaby. Outside, the streetlights cast pale halos on her cracked pavement. She had saved a stranger's life, but the memory wasn't clean. It was messy and heavy, tangled with guilt. They had no milk now. She'd broken Grandma's rule, and there was the man himself, his eyes when they opened, the rasp in his voice when he'd said thank you. She pushed the thought away, curling onto her side. But sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him on the ground, hand reaching toward her like she was the only solid thing in the world. The next day at the church pantry, the air smelled of stale coffee and overripe fruit. Volunteers passed out oatmeal packets and dented cans. Maya kept her hood low as she sorted apples into a bin. The gossip swirled around her. They say he's some big-time businessman, one man said, adjusting the cap on his head. Collapsed near Jackson Square. Would have died if not for a kid. Kid disappeared before anyone could thank her, another added, like an angel. Maya's hands froze mid-reach. She dropped an apple into the bin to hard, bruising. Its skin dot Miss Lillian, the pantry's sharp-eyed volunteer with her crown of silver curls, noticed. She sidled over, lowering her voice. You hear about the man in the alley? Maya shrugged. Maybe. Miss Lillian's eyes narrowed, reading her like a page. If you ever wanted to meet him, I might know how to arrange it, but only if you're ready. The girl shook her head fast. No, I don't want trouble. By that evening, Marcus had traded the hospital gown for a tailored overcoat. He stood at the mouth of the same alley, hands in his pockets, watching the light fade over the uneven bricks. Jeremy stood beside him. She ran that way. Marcus said quietly, pointing toward the street line with second-hand stores and boarded windows, probably toward somewhere she knew. Jeremy gave him a sideways look. You're sure you want to keep looking? She clearly doesn't want to be found. Marcus glanced down at the inhaler in his pocket, fingers brushing the worn butterfly sticker. She saved my life. I just want to tell her. No one else did what she did. No one else even stopped. That night, as the city buzzed with music and neon, a girl in a too-small coat sat cross-legged on her bed, drawing a butterfly in the corner of an old cereal box. Outside, unseen in the dark, a man walked the streets just blocks away, tracing the memory of her face in every passerby, every shadow, determined to turn their fleeting moment in the alley into something more. Neither of them knew yet they were already on a collision course. The wind carried the smell of chicory coffee and rain-washed pavement. As Maya lingered in the shadows behind the church gate, her hood pulled low, across the street, a man stood alone beside the steps, the kind of man who didn't belong in this part of town. His coat was too clean, his shoes too sharp, and yet he didn't look like the bankers or tourists she'd seen sweep through and vanish. He wasn't moving. He was waiting. Miss Lillian's voice echoed in her mind from the day before. He came by again, said he owes you his life, just wants to know you're safe. Her heart thudded so loud she was sure he'd hear it from across the street. This was him, the man from the alley, the man she'd saved, the man whose eyes had locked on hers before she disappeared into the noise. She could turn around, slip into the side door, lose herself in the pantry's bustle, but some part of her small, stubborn, and stronger than the fear pushed her forward. One step, then another. The sound of her sneakers on the cracked sidewalk made his head lift. His gaze found hers instantly, as if he'd been scanning every face, waiting for this exact moment. You came, he said, his voice carrying a strange mix of relief and caution. Maya kept her eyes down. Miss Lillian said you wanted to see me. I did. He took a slow step forward, the movement deliberate, careful, like approaching something fragile. I wanted to say thank you for what you did. She shifted her weight, ready to bolt if he moved too fast. You're not mad at me, mad. He shook his head. Sweetheart, you're the reason I'm standing here. For the first time, she risked looking up at him fully. He didn't look like the invincible men in expensive suits she'd seen in TV commercials or on billboards. There were lines of exhaustion etched into his face, a slight tremor in his hands as they rested at his sides. You looked like you were gonna die, she said softly. I felt like I was, he admitted. Then, almost with a smile, but you didn't run away. Not until after you saved me. Her fingers dug into the edge of her pocket, finding the soft curve of her butterfly coin pouch. She hesitated, then pulled it out, holding it between them. That was the last money we had. His smile faded, replaced by something heavier: guilt. Maybe, or a realization that this wasn't a fairy tale rescue where both sides walk away unchanged. I can make sure you and your grandma don't have to worry like that again, he said quietly. She took a small step back, instinct rising. Like a wall. You're not gonna take me away, are you? He shook his head fast. No, I promise. I'm not here to change where you live or how you live. I'm here because I owe you more than I can explain. For a long moment, they stood in the middle of the street, the city moving around them in blurs of light and sound. Then she nodded once, sharp and small. Okay, his shoulders eased. Can I ask your name? Maya. That's a beautiful name, he said, and when she didn't reply, he added, Maya, you saved my life, and I'll never forget the butterfly on your pouch. She glanced down at it, then back at him. You gonna disappear now? He hesitated, and in that pause, she heard the truth. He didn't know what came next. Not unless you want me to, he said finally. Her answer was barely above a whisper. You can stay for now. And just like that, the distance between them wasn't measured in steps anymore, but in a fragile, shared understanding that neither of them could quite name yet. The first morning he didn't come, Maya told herself he was busy. The second morning, she thought maybe he was sick. By the third, she stopped making excuses. Each day, she sat by the window with her chin on the sill, watching the corner where he'd always appear, coat collar turned up against the wind, canvas bag slung over his shoulder, smile just crooked enough to look real. Now, the sidewalk was only concrete and shadow. No knock at the door, no butterfly books, no cocoa that steamed up her cold hands. She tried not to care, but the hollow inside her grew louder. The truth was, she'd started to believe in his promise. I won't disappear unless you ask me to. She hadn't asked. The city went on without him. Vendors hawked baked in the square. Buskers played brass under peeling balconies. But to Maya, the noise felt muted, like someone had turned down the volume. Grandma noticed. One morning over thin oatmeal, she asked, He's not coming, is he? Maya shook her head, her eyes fixed on the swirl of steam rising from her bowl. Men, like that, Grandma said slowly, they come into our world like they're just passing through. Sometimes they mean to stay. Sometimes they can't. Even promises break, child. Doesn't mean they were lies when they were made. The word stung. Maya wasn't sure if she was angry at him or at herself for believing he was different. It was Miss Lillian who brought the next turn in the story. Maya was stocking cans at the church pantry when the older woman tapped her on the shoulder. Something came for you, she said, holding out a thick envelope. The paper was heavy, the kind you couldn't buy at the corner store. Her name was written in tight, slanted handwriting. No return address, no logo. Maya opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter. I'm sorry I disappeared. Something happened I didn't expect. My company before I ever met you is under investigation. Old deals. Bad partners. Nothing I did, but enough to drag my name through the mud if it came out. I had to step away immediately, or everything I promised you and your grandma would vanish with me. My lawyer said silence was safest until it settled. It wasn't my choice, but I honored it. I've missed our mornings, your butterflies, your strength. You are more than a girl who saved a life. You changed lives by being present. Enclosed is something I hope brings you peace until I return. And I will return. Marcus behind the letter was a certificate, official and gold seal, a scholarship in her name, full tuition, art supplies, mentorship, after-school enrichment. Maya's throat tightened. He hadn't forgotten. Grandma leaned over her shoulder. Looked like that man meant what he said. Maya tucked the letter into her butterfly pouch, holding it close like a heartbeat. She didn't know when or if she'd see him again, but for the first time in days, the hall didn't feel so empty. And far across the city, in a hotel room filled with files and lawyers' voices, Marcus Coleman sat with a matching envelope in his pocket, the one he would carry until the day he could hand it to her himself. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and polish, the air thick with the low murmur of voices waiting for the spectacle to begin. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the tension was worse without them. Everything felt sharper, more dangerous. Maya sat beside Grandma in the second row, her small hands clenched around the butterfly pin Marcus had given her. She'd never been in a place like this before. The high ceiling seemed to swallow sound. The judge's bench loomed like a cliff, casting the defense and prosecution in shadows. When Marcus entered, flanked by his lawyer, the room shifted. He looked different from the man she'd last seen, still in a navy suit, but leaner, as though the weeks of silence had carved something away from him. He glanced toward the gallery and found her instantly. The brief smile that flickered across his face was gone almost as quickly as it came, but it was enough to steady her. The prosecutor started with a voice like a hammer. Fraud, negligence, abuse of position. He painted Marcus as a ruthless billionaire who had drained his own company for profit. Each accusation landed like a stone dropped in water, ripples of murmurs spreading through the room. Maya couldn't reconcile the man they described with the one who had brought her books and puzzles, who had fixed their heater without a word, who had stood in her doorway carrying groceries with a sheepish smile. Then Marcus's lawyer stood, a calm woman in a gray suit, her tone deliberate, measured. She dismantled the claims piece by piece, producing binders thick with documentation, emails, financial records, sworn statements, and then, to Maya's shock, she said, "Your Honor, the defense calls Maya Williams to the stand." Grandma's hand closed over hers. "You don't have to," but Maya was already standing. Her legs felt like they were moving through water as she walked the long aisle. The bailiff opened the little gate, and suddenly she was looking up at the judge. "The light's hotter here, the air heavier. State your name for the record," the clerk said. "Maya Williams." "And how do you know Mr. Coleman?" the lawyer asked. Her voice shook at first. He almost died. I found him in an alley. People walked by like he wasn't there, but I stayed. I gave him the last money we had to get him an inhaler." The courtroom rustled with surprise. "And what happened after that?" "He came back," she said. "He didn't know me anything, but he came back every day. He helped us when no one else did, not for cameras, not for attention, just because it was right." The prosecutor rose slowly, his voice softer now. "Maya, are you aware of the accusations against Mr. Coleman?" "I know people are trying to blame him for things he didn't do," she replied, her chin lifting slightly. "I also know what it's like to be blamed just because of where you come from, or because people don't believe someone like you can do the right thing." "And why are you so certain about him?" Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out her sketchbook. She flipped to a page and held it up, a butterfly with mismatched wings. "One bright, one dark. Because this is the man I know, not perfect, not powerful all the time, but someone who got a second chance and used it." Silence fell. When she stepped down, Marcus mouthed "Thank you." She only nodded, returning to her seat, heart pounding. But lighter somehow. The rest of the hearing blurred together, arguments, rebuttals, the judge's gavel striking to announce that the verdict would come in a week. Outside, the drizzle had turned to sunlight. Marcus caught up with them on the courthouse steps. "I didn't know they'd call you," he said quietly. "I wanted to speak," Maya replied. "You helped me find my voice." For the first time in weeks, he let out a laugh, not the polite, kind, but the real kind, full and unguarded. And in that moment, Maya knew that no matter what happened next, the truth had already changed something in both of them. The courthouse steps were still damp from the morning rain when the verdict came down. The judge's voice had been even, almost bored, but the words had landed like a bell tolling across the city. "All charges dismissed. Mr. Coleman is cleared of all wrongdoing." For a heartbeat, the room had been silent, then a rustle of reporters bolting for the doors, phones buzzing, pens scratching. Marcus didn't react right away. He sat still, shoulders low, eyes closed, like a man finally exhaling after holding his breath for years. Maya had wanted to run to him then, but Grandma's hand on her knee kept her in her seat until the gavel struck for the last time. Only when the bailiff called the court adjourned did she rise, weaving through the throng until she stood just a few feet away. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. "We did it." His gaze dropped to her butterfly pen. "You kept me fighting when it would have been easier to walk away." The next days moved like a storm turning into sunlight. Marcus was back in the news, not as a villain, but as the man who had been falsely accused. His face filled headlines alongside phrases like exonerated and vindicated. But the story he told in every interview wasn't about the court case. It was about an 11-year-old girl who had saved his life in an alley. When everyone else had passed him by, Maya hated the cameras at first. They crowded outside the church pantry, the corner store, even her school gates. But Marcus was careful. He Never let them shove a microphone in her face. Never let them frame her as some charity project. Instead, one afternoon, he called her and Grandma to a quiet corner of the French Quarter. They walked together until they came to a building with faded green shutters and a painted sign that read the Second Chance Project. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows on shelves stacked with art supplies, computers, books in every color. There was a small kitchen, a homework room, even a studio with walls covered in murals of butterflies. Maya stood frozen in the doorway. "What is this?" "It's yours," Marcus said simply. "Well, ours. A place for kids like you, smart, strong, overlooked, to have somewhere safe to learn, create, and be seen, funded, staffed, and protected. Forever." Her throat went tight. "You built this for me. I built it because of you." He corrected. "You reminded me that money means nothing if it doesn't change something for the better." Grandma's eyes were wet, her voice soft. "Looked like you started something big, baby girl." The first time Maya unlocked the door as the center's youth director, a crowd of kids poured in, their laughter bouncing off the high ceilings. She showed them the art room, the reading nook, the quiet corner with beanbags where she'd once dreamed of having her own books later. As the sun set and the room emptied, she stood by the window, watching the street below. Marcus was across the room, adjusting a frame on the wall. It was the butterfly drawing from her sketchbook, mismatched wings, one bright, one dark, blown up and mounted above the entrance. He caught her looking. "You ready for what comes next?" Maya smiled, a little crooked like his, but full of something steady. "I've been ready since that alley." And as the lights flickered on inside the Second Chance Project, spilling gold onto the street, the two of them knew this was more than the end of a trial, more than paying back a debt. It was the start of a legacy neither of them could have. Imagine when a billionaire stumbled into an alley and a girl with $5 decided to change everything.